This right here is the GPD XP, a modular Android gaming device that I've been pretty excited to try out. Now, it's not without its flaws, and the price perhaps might be a turnoff for some people, but I think this offers a pretty awesome gaming experience. The first thing that I think most people find weird about the GPD XP is that it's pretty wide, perhaps wider than it really needed to be. And part of that has to do with this right here. This is a camera hole cutout because this is basically a cell phone. You can throw a SIM card in here, and though the marketing materials on the web make it clear that it doesn't make phone calls, you could still presumably call people using voice over IP services like Skype or whatever. So, you know, odd decision, especially the way they phrase it on the page. They say they don't want users getting distracted by phone calls and they don't want them to have to come up with excuses not to pick up. So they decided to strip away the phone functionality altogether. Weird rationale, I will say. But as I was saying, this camera cutout here reveals that the people over at GPD used a phone screen to make this device. This is a 6.8-inch screen, which is sizable, and that's not a bad thing per se. But the problem is that pushes the device horizontally a little bit too wide. I'm gonna show you what I mean. This right here is my launch switch, which lately I haven't really been touching. And let me try to show you here. I think this should give you a pretty good idea of the geometry on the GPD XP. It's about as long as the switch, but it's a little bit more narrow. So it gives that impression, see, not by much, right? But enough that this whole thing seems a little just too wide. And, you know, that's because they went with the screen this big. Perhaps if they chose a screen that has the same width but maybe not as long, they would have made it a little easier to carry, and more importantly, it would have worked better for a lot of the games, and I'll show you what I mean here. So, but before we get to that, let's take a look at the body of the device. So at the top here you have the on-off button, which also puts the device to sleep. You have a volume rocker, two sets of shoulder buttons right here. So these are digital, they're not analog. So when you're playing a racing game, for instance, and you hit the accelerator, if it's calibrated to the R2 here, once you hit that, you're basically going pedal to the metal. So, you know, for racers, that's going to be a little bit of a problem. For the purists anyway, if you're playing these racing games casually, you're probably not going to mind that much. Continuing here at the bottom, you have the USB port to charge. You have the SIM tray I mentioned earlier that also doubles as an SD card slot, so you can actually increase the storage on this guy here. It comes with 128 gigs, and for my purposes, and you'll see what I mean by that, I really won't need to expand the storage on this thing because I don't plan on using this thing so much to play local games. I plan to use this more for streaming. Anyway, going back to the back here, as you can see, this is something that you can't really tell from the promotional materials, the ones I've seen at least. It has these, you know, it has some junk in the trunk, so to speak. It has these bumps here that help you grip the device and make for a little more comfortable, like right here, see your hands kind of have something to grab onto, so this is nice and comfortable. Your hands are far enough apart that it feels really natural to hold this thing, so no complaints there. Nothing on the sides here. And at the front you have the face buttons, which are labeled as an Xbox controller, which is going to come really handy for my purposes here, and you'll see what I mean again. The D-pad reminds me of the Vita D-pad, both in looks and in responsiveness. It's a really good D-pad actually. The D-pads on these devices have come a long way. You have these keys here, these shortcut buttons for Android, but one thing I really dislike, I'm going to boot something up here so I can show you what I mean. This you would think would be the back button because it's a little triangle pointing left. This would be the home button, and this would be the multitasker button. However, it's the exact opposite. They have this for back, they have this as the multitask, as you can see there, and then this is home, as you would expect. I have no idea why they did this, and Android being pretty flexible, I'm sure there's gotta be a way to invert these. I wasn't able to find it in the settings. I suppose there could be an app that allows you to remap these. That would be really good because this throws me off all the time. I have no idea why this, I'm not sure if this is a problem with my machine or if this is widespread. This is the back button, this is the app switcher. They should be flipped. Anyway, you got start and select here at the bottom, D-pad, the Android task buttons here. Base buttons, you have two analogs that are pretty good. The dead zone is really minimal. Like, I gotta say, for all the flaws this device might have, the input buttons are really solid. Everything feels exactly how it should, but I almost booted up Game Pass here. I'm getting ahead of myself. When you're loading Android games, which I'm not going to be using this to load I'm going to boot up Dead Cells here. So when you're loading an Android game on this device, the game is able to fill the entire screen. Now, there's good and bad that comes with that. This looks better because the entire screen is being used, but at the same time, you have to deal with the little hole there for the camera, which likely you won't be using on a device like this. I understand, I imagine that what happened here is that GPD went with this screen because they were able to save a little bit, perhaps. I played a lot of this game on my Switch, and it's really nice playing on a device like this as well. This device is pretty competent. It can pretty much handle whatever you throw at it. This is a game I've had some issues running on other Android devices, so I like it as a benchmark for performance. Performance on this device, I only have good things to say about it. It's pretty decent. Now, in the case with Dead Cells and a lot of Android games, they're able to automatically detect that the device you're playing on has built-in controls, right? If that's not the case with a lot of older titles, you can press this button right here and that's what you have. This is an experience that's pretty familiar to GPD devices. On my GPD XD right here, it was right, where is it? Right there. You see how that button has a little controller? It would do the exact same thing. This is something that we've come to expect from devices like this that allow you to play games that were not intended to be played with a controller. Though these are becoming less relevant as time goes on because a lot of these Android games, they just usually nowadays come with built-in controller support without you having to do anything at all. It just recognizes the controller on the device that you're using, so that's pretty nice. Now, you know the drill with devices like this, right? Like, usually I go through the motions of playing some Android games, some emulators and everything like that. That's what I've always done with these devices, so I'm kind of, at this point, considering how many I've reviewed over the years, I'm kind of bored of that functionality. I feel like every other device does about the same. What I'm really hopeful for this device is, as I accidentally booted up earlier, Game Pass. This is basically a dedicated Game Pass machine. Also, before I get into that, one thing I have to show, I did mention it's a modular device, and that's because you can actually pull out the side here, the part with the shoulder buttons, the analog and the face buttons, right? And start and select, can't forget those. And this is a port to attach other controllers, like for instance, this thing right here. This comes in the box, by the way. So this would be good for playing MOBAs, because then you can assign, let's attach that. There's why am I having so, oh, there it is. It's an, like there we go. So this is great if you're playing MOBAs, because then you can just set different attacks to these buttons here, and this will work a little bit better than a regular controller for some games. For some MOBAs, this will likely be a better configuration than the other attachment. At the back here, it's interesting. It only has one shoulder button right here. It's labeled 5. So the face buttons are 1 through 4. There's a red button, there's a 5 here, and then there's a 6 right here. It's like a solitary shoulder button in the middle of the attachment, which is kind of funky, right? A little bit weird, but you know, it's you know, sits right in the hand. It's not bad. Although I'm not a MOBA guy, I don't see myself using this attachment too often. In the box, you'll also get this little stopper, which doesn't have any functions other than just, you know, blocking that. So if you're playing a game that only requires input on the left hand side here, you got that. It reduces the footprint of the device, but kind of looks stupid now. These two attachments, I don't suspect I'm going to be using them too often. This is where it's at. So going back to Game Pass, the way I interpret this device, this could be a decent device to play on Game Pass exclusively, as though this were a portable Xbox, and it runs really, really well. I've been playing through Batman Arkham City, but as I mentioned before, the problem with such a wide screen like this, like the whole device is so wide, right, is that these games are not going to fill the entire screen like Android games. Android games are made with the design philosophy that they're going to be played on a bunch of different devices. So they are programmed ahead of time to make the most of the screen that they're running on. So you'll find that when you're playing a native Android game, the whole screen is going to be used up, you know, and then you have to deal with the little eye hole there. Now, with a game that was originally intended to be played on a television, you're not going to have that. Now, if you're playing a game that was originally meant to be played on a television, not going to be the same. Batman is probably not a good example because the game's so dark you can barely tell that there's black screens here. There's black bars here on either side. Well, I guess you can tell now. So this annoys the hell out of me because considering this is going to be the primary use of this device in my life, just basically a portable Xbox, it makes it so that there's like this much space that's completely wasted. Not only that, but the whole device is bigger and less pocketable because of that. So this is a design choice that I suspect that this form factor for the screen was just easier to procure. It's like just, oh shoot, I forgot how to glide. I guess I haven't played in a little while. This game is so great, and I'm not sure if you can tell there, but it runs flawlessly. If your internet is decent enough, it runs flawlessly, and it's a great use case for a device like this. Perhaps not so much because of the price. This thing costs a little over $400. Depending on the site where you buy them, it can be for on a deal or something. But it's a little bit of a pricier proposition, considering that for a fraction of that cost, you could buy a Bluetooth controller and pair it with your phone and basically get the same functionality. Now, some people, and I count myself among them, do prefer this kind of solution. It's just so elegant. You just pull this out of your pocket and it's all ready to go. You don't have to pair anything. It's just, you know, there. Also, I do like the fact that this thing allows for you to throw a SIM card in it, and then you don't have to be beholden to Wi-Fi access to play your Xbox games. I really do like that. I would like to see more of these Android gaming devices have SIM card slots. I suspect that as oh, did I just die? No, I just beat them. I suspect that as game streaming becomes more relevant, more Android devices such as the GPD XP will come with something like a SIM card slot. So this is a great way to experience these games, I find, and I did test it with my SIM card and it worked just great. There's not a lot of latency. The dead zones of the analog sticks are pretty good. This is as close to the experience you'd get if Microsoft were to make an actual portable Xbox. I just love this. It's just great. A lot of people in the community were disappointed because they don't like this form factor so much. A lot of people were hopeful that GPD would return to the form factor of the GPD and the GPD XD Plus. I am personally a sucker for this format here. It's just much more pocketable, the screen is always protected, and if this thing were to have a SIM slot, it would be killer. So there is the idea for GPD in the future perhaps. But as it stands, the GPD XP is a pretty solid device. It is very competent. It's comfortable to hold if, you know, a little on the, you know, bigger side. Then again, it's not that big because if you can carry around a Switch, this is smaller, right? Is it lighter? It is, you know, about the same weight as a Switch, but, you know, noticeably smaller. This has been, for the last couple of weeks, basically my portable Xbox. So I'm loving it. I don't play so many Android games. I don't play so many emulators. In fact, because I play a lot of 16-bit stuff, running an emulator on this thing almost kind of looks silly because, you know, your 4x3 game sticks right in the middle here and you have all that wasted space. So not a device I would recommend if emulators are your thing. You could probably save money and get something a little bit smaller. But if you're looking for something that has both the performance and the form factor and the SIM card tray to basically be a portable Xbox wherever you are, this is a pretty solid recommendation. I wish it was cheaper, but I guess that can be said about literally anything. Though I suspect that GPD will see some pushback because this thing will likely not sell so much considering the price. If they found a way to make something exactly like this but was closer to the 250 range, I think they would have a real hit on their hands. But that is the GPD XP. If you have any further questions about the device, let me know in the comments. I'll try to answer them as they come. I'm very active on both Twitter and Instagram if you're into that, so look me up on those. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done.